Okay, Craig. Good evening from Jakarta to Mexico, to Tepotlan, which is near Mexico City. I'm Ilham A Habibie, the head of Wantikas, and I'm here with my very, very long time friend and my partner and my colleague in many things, and we do many things together, Professor Dr. Craig Smith from the United States. He has lived and spent considerable time in Asia, in Singapore, in China, and of course also in Indonesia, years and years and years, and also sometime I forgot to say in Thailand. And the reason why Professor Craig has been particularly in Indonesia is for one specific topic, which I like to mention here, which we call meaningful broadband. And what is meaningful broadband and how it all came about? This is basically and how it's going to evolve in the next years, and what's the benefit for us in Indonesia or for everybody in the world. That is supposed to be the topic of today's podcast. So maybe we should start with an introduction. Craig, maybe can you give some input about yourself, how this, I mean, what is your background basically, and how we met so many years back, and what did we do together? I'm of course happy to tag along and give some more information if needed. Okay, Craig, go ahead.
Sure, Ilham, thank you. So Ilham and my relationship goes back to about 2005 or 2006. I'm not sure exactly which of these years. It might have been even 2004. But at that time, I was a Harvard professor of science and technology tied to the Kennedy School of Government. But I wasn't teaching it at Harvard itself, but deployed to Singapore at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. And at that time, I was not only teaching a course on how to overcome the digital divide, or how to create an equitable embrace of the internet around the world, but I was also advising various governments in Southeast Asia, in China, in India. And one of my stops led me to Jakarta. I think it was the Harvard Club in Jakarta. Exactly. And that's where my relationship with Ilham Habibie and I began. And quite frankly, it was a life-changing meeting, because I saw I immediately saw that there was a certain kind of alignment between the Habibie legacy, which is now extended not only personally by B.J. Habibie's eldest son, but also the Habibie Center, and as a way of bringing democratization and technology together. And those two notions were so powerful, and it led me to understand that Indonesia has a vital role in the future of the digital economy, and yet it required a relationship with Ilham. It required our going around the world together. It required many, many seminars and discussions and reports to the Indonesian government. And it has led us finally to this question of how the meaningful approach to technology could be extended into this new emergent era of artificial intelligence, which is what I hope we can discuss in the next hour. So Ilham, maybe you could describe
Yeah.
our meeting and
Yeah.
what it's like for you.
Itu cuma monitornya, suaranya dari sini.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry, can you hear me, Craig?
Yeah.
Okay, because I was kind of confused. I saw this unmute sign on my screen, but it's not really muted. So I thought that my colleagues here have to unmute me first before I can say anything. But actually, I'm recorded, despite the fact that the mute sign is on. Okay, well, thanks, Craig, for the lead up. Yes, indeed. I mean, Craig and I met briefly at a seminar of the Harvard Alumni Club in Jakarta. And I think we exchanged contact data, but we only met again in 2006. There was a gap of like 2 years. We just basically communicated via email. But in 2006, we started to work more intensively together. And the topic of digital divide is something that Craig has explored since the 90s. Craig has established the Digital Divide Insttute, and I was, I think, an advisor to that for some time. As an outcome of his work regarding digital divide, to overcome that, it was clear that broadband, basically fast internet, plays a big role. And Craig coined this term, meaningful broadband. So broadband not just for the sake of connecting people and then see basically what's the outcome without being proactively involved, what that outcome should be. So broadband for developmental purposes, I think that is the true meaningfulness of the technology. And maybe you want to say it, what the definition of meaningful broadband is, because you coined the term, Craig. What is meaningful broadband?
Well, you know, I haven't ever explained this to you, Ilham, but the real origin of the term meaningful relating to technology in my personal history began when I was still at Harvard, because I was for a few years at both Harvard and MIT as a kind of visiting scholar or a visiting fellow in both universities. And the challenge that I was given by Jeff Sachs, who was my advisor at Harvard, and Sandy Pentland, who was my advisor in MIT, was how these two worlds of Harvard and MIT could come together so that the humanistic tradition of Harvard that really evolved from Oxford centuries earlier could be combined with the techno approach of MIT. And so there was a kind of internal think tank that we held linking Harvard and MIT. And out of this came the notion that what bridges both sides is the word meaningful. Okay. So what does meaningful mean? Ilham and I have talked about the three terms: endlessly, usable, affordable, and empowering. But maybe a more specific definition of meaningful is to be relevant to the context. In other words, it's not some kind of extreme benefit for society that could not be achievable, but meaningful is something that fits the context. It's relevant to every nation, every society. It's how to bring about the most meaningful, optimal outcome in any given context. So that's what's meaningful. And when Ilham and I got together, we were really like swimming like a salmon swimming up against the stream, because we were essentially going against the materialism that was spreading through the digital economy, and coming up with a way of linking business, government, and nonprofits produce a more equitable and more meaningful approach to technology.
Yeah, that's very well described, Craig. So once we basically had the core definition of how we would see broadband as a core technology for development in the future, we began then to host many seminars in the region. I remember, Craig, we went to Google in the very early years when they were headquartered. They're still headquartered, but the office location was somewhere near the Marina Bay, not Marina Bay, in the banking area. We went there, then we went to Chulalongkorn University, hosted a seminar there, supported by True Corporation. And of course, we did a series of seminars at the Office of the President. Indonesia is KSP, where we basically collaborated with a gentleman by the name of Wim Tangkilisan. And so in that, we basically collaborated with an organization called, then it was called Ditiknas, and which was headed by the Minister for Communication and Informatics in Indonesia. And so we basically, as Digital Divide Insttute, or then we formed something like a working group, the Meaningful Broadband Working Group, which would include, of course, the Digital Divide Insttute, Ditiknas then, and a few other organizations. And those seminars were hosted from time to time at the office of the president near the, or actually in the premises of the presidential palace in Jakarta. So I remember that one day we were having a seminar there. Suddenly I was called by the minister for the secretariat of the cabinet, Dr. Dipo Awam. And he basically mentioned to me that the president then, that was President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, or abbreviated as SBY, he wanted to talk to me about something related to Ditiknas. And a few months later, or weeks, I don't remember exactly when it was, I was having the honor and pleasure to meet the president then, President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, SBY. And in that very meeting, President SBY asked me to become the chief executive of Ditiknas, which I am still until now. So basically, Ditiknas, in the meantime, we have basically rebranded, still the same meaning, National Council for ICT, but we call it now not Ditiknas because there was some confusion with the word Ditik, because there are some other entities in Indonesia that have a similar name, they're quite known. And so many people were confused hearing that, and so we call it now not Ditik, but Wantikas. So until today, now almost 10 years or more, yes, almost 10 years, I'm here serving as the chief executive of Wantikas, and that came all about because Craig and I organized a series of meetings about meaningful broadband, among others, at the presidential palace, or to be precise, in the offices of the secretariat of the president, or the office of the president in Jakarta. And so, and now today's podcast, I'm here. Of course, I'm here as the friend and partner of Craig, but I'm also here as the chief executive of Wantikas. So Wantikas is an organization which has been actually founded in Indonesia in 2006. And originally, the chief executive was always ex officio the Minister for Communication and Informatics. But since that decree, which was the presidential decree #1 in 2014, that has changed. And so I have been given the honor and pleasure to be that chief executive since then. I report in that regard directly to the president via the Minister for National Planning and the head of Bappenas. And so the role of Wantikas is to get involved in problem solving of strategic issues pertaining to ICT. Wantikas has also a coordinative role in the central level between ministries, and of course we report to the office of the president or to the president himself. And we also do the same thing, not only in the central government, but also in the local government. And we are also involved in giving input for planning and particular problem solving if there's some very specific regarding ICT. And lately we have been also giving the additional task to help, to assist, to give input regarding the digital transformation that we in Indonesia, like every other country and every other people, go through in the world, which is very fundamental and has to be seen as a very disruptive transformation in many regards. And we're going through this already since many years, and there's still many years to come. As Craig pointed out very correctly, one of the current main issues that we are facing in the world is how do we deal and make meaningful use of artificial intelligence without AI basically creating more damage or havoc to the countries, to the world, to the people, than it creates benefits. And that is what Craig mentioned briefly before in his talk, being meaningful artificial intelligence, or MAI. Maybe Craig, you want to take it up here?
Sure. Thank you, Ilham. So, quite frankly, over the years, people have asked Ilham and myself, well, what have you accomplished? What have you achieved? What has been the outcome of 25 years of promoting meaningful broadband, meaningful technologies? What benefit has come to the nation? Well, I think the major benefit has been in the area of infrastructure. And so now I think most of the nation families do have smartphones. And most citizens are able to receive government services through their mobile phones and so forth. And so all of this is called meaningful access. So all of this creates the potential for meaningful use of the technology. And the meaningful use of the technology has to do with AI, has to do with meaningful artificial intelligence. So we are at the beginning of an AI revolution that has begun really only in the last 6 months, only in 2023. The big change from before is not that AI is new for Indonesians, but AI has always been under the surface. What has happened in a way that is the beginning of some kind of revolution is that individuals can speak to and direct the AI. In other words, it's the beginning of a reality that everybody can have their machine and everybody can come up with changes in their lifestyles, in their jobs, in their education, in order to clarify how they can be empowered through AI by impacting it directly. So through their voices, through their texting, this is very different from before, when Amazon would tell you what books you should buy or something like that. This is where citizens could have the agency to direct machines. And we're just taking baby steps in this direction. But I have to say that it's very important that we have Nadim as Minister of Education and Culture, because he really walks the talk in his educational philosophy. So it's through meaningful AI that the potential of the ideas that he's introduced could be realized at scale. So we're now talking about meaningful use of technology enabled by AI. And there was recently a big conference at the Ilham, it wasn't the JCC. What was the name of the expo?
It's a GI Expo. It's at it's the very big it's the Jakarta Fair area, basically in the north of Jakarta. GI Expo.
So it was a summit meeting with basically
And an exhibition at the same time. Exhibition at the same time.
Yeah, led by Professor Reza, no?
Yeah, Hamam Reza.
Right. And so out of this conference, a framework emerged for what kind of policy would be needed for Indonesia. Clearly, Indonesia, like some other countries, needs to reset its AI policy from before in light of Chat GPT. Excuse me, I need to plug in my laptop here for a moment.
Oh, you're losing power. Maybe in the meantime, I say a few words on top of what you said, Craig.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, very, very true what Craig just said. AI has been around for many, many years already, only that the interaction of us humans with AI was more unidirectional. We were giving information, but we couldn't ask back. Let's give you some examples. Like if you would use Google Maps or Waze to get from A to B in the fastest way possible, the way those applications work is that they indeed use AI to find the shortest way, given the information that they get from many sources. Those kind of AI is basically called AI machine learning, or if there's no pattern visible, then it's deep learning. But basically, algorithms that have a learning capability, they can refine themselves using the data that they have, and they get better results by doing that. Another form of AI that we know is basically so-called face recognition. It's very different. It's very visual. So if we would use more recent generations of mobile phones, then we can basically enter those once we just look at it, and it will recognize us and allow us to use the mobile phone. But again, this is unidirectional. It's basically the machine gives us information, and we give the information to the machine or to the system, not in a very intensive way. It's different with the new so-called NLP, or National Language Processes, or the generative AI. There we intensively communicate with the machine, and it gives us the suggestion that the machine is something that has life, basically. It asks back, and it says good morning, and I think for many humans that use Chat GPT, the warning is very clearly written on the wall. We have to be careful not to fall into the trap of so-called hallucination. So there is a world being projected based on information that is not all completely curated. So ChatGPT or any other generative technology uses information available on the net. And I think all of us know the quality of the information available on the net varies. Some is very good, but some is not so good, and some is completely wrong, and some is viciously or with a bad intention wrongly posted in order to mislead people. And so the human, and I remember the very famous founder of OpenAI, which created Chat GPT. Sam Altman, he came also to Indonesia lately, not the last time here when we had this conference, but he came some months ago, and I watched a televised event where he was basically having a Q&A with US Congress about the Chat GPT application itself, what's actually the reasoning behind that and how should we interact with that. And it was clear that even the founder of Chat GPT was emphasizing it is a tool. It will not take over the world, and it's not something that basically is meant to basically not to substitute the human. We as humans have to use it wisely, and as we like to say here in this chat, in this podcast, we want to use it meaningfully. But it depends on us, right? I mean, how do we use it, and also how do we design it? And so there are, I think, in the hotspot of discussion regarding AI use, particularly generative AI or NLP, natural language processing, is basically the ethical part. How to basically design the criteria to make sure that the outcome is as balanced, as transparent, as high quality, as meaningful as possible. Okay, Craig, I think you're back online, and you probably fixed the problem with your power regarding the laptop. Please take over.
Okay. Well, regarding meaningful AI, I think there's two or three aspects that I want.
The voice is not very good right now. Is there something with the mic on your part? It's very low voice.
Okay, is this better? A little
Way
bit
better.
closer?
This is way better. Before it was.
Okay, I'll just lean in then. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So in the year since Chat GPT exploded to create this new era of AI, essentially, I see the conversation about AI as divided in two separate domains. There's the warnings of the potential harm, and so we have people. Remember, a year or two ago, we had Henry Kissinger writing a book about the dangers of AI, and
did he a book? Okay.
Yeah, a book about it, together with the former chairman of Google. And we also have
Eric Schmidt.
Yeah, Eric Schmidt.
Okay.
And we also have quite recently the activity of Elon Musk, where he has warned about the dangers of AI and proposed a halting of the innovation. So there's, and even Gregory Hinton, who is, I don't know, he's kind of like a figure analogous to Oppenheimer at the end of World War II, who was basically had ethical qualms about the world he was opening up. And Gregory Hinton is the godfather of AI, and really it was Google rather than Microsoft who owned most of the AI expertise in Silicon Valley. And it was really led by Gregory Hinton, but he left Google in order to basically warn of the dangers of AI. But it's important to know that none of these warnings by Elon Musk or anyone else was ever combined with any kind of knowledge of how to actually regulate this technology at a global basis. And so most of the ideas about warnings were made by people who actually moved ahead with their own AI, even as they were warning the public about it. So that's one side of the conversation. The other side of the conversation, opened up by the consulting firm McKinsey and other sources, and you know, is that a lot of money was tied to creating a standard for artificial general intelligence (AGI), in which point the machine would be smarter than humans. And so McKinsey predicted that up to $17 trillion of added value would be brought to the economy as a result of AI. And based on that prediction and other factors, we've seen that NASDAQ, the tech-oriented
Stock exchange
index, has risen by 40% in just this year in anticipation of this. And the predicted recession in the United States never happened. The U.S. economy has been going wild in growth. And so many forces are now in back of this spreading growth without ever leaving behind the concerns about regulation. So you have concerns about regulation on one side, and then you have this huge opportunity that comes on the other hand. So what distinguishes meaningful AI is that it's the first model of AI regulation to come from the developing world. The idea is to get the 5 nations that are members of G20 to join together, the 5 developing nations of G20 that by circumstance are all leading G20 in successive years. First it was Indonesia last year, India this year, Brazil next year, South Africa the following year, and then it's Mexico finally at the end of the process. So if we can activate meaningful AI in Indonesia first, it could trigger an evolution across these 5 nations so that we end up with a framework where we can invite US, China, and the EU all to join together with these 5 major developing nations. And so that's the big view of meaningful AI. But first it needs to begin in Indonesia itself. And I want to say just one thing about that before I turn it back over to Ilham, and that is that, quite frankly, I was depressed when I left Indonesia last year. I had COVID illness that sent me to the hospital in Bali, and I really didn't think that my life was amounting to anything because I didn't see the tangible benefit of my work with Ilham. Now, as we've seen this explosive rise of AI, it's now possible to imagine that perhaps all the work we've done has created the preconditions for an approach to AI that would spread through the developing nations and that really fulfills the legacy of B.J. Habibie, who did this amazing thing, this miraculous thing so many years ago when he turned the Suharto era into a vibrant democracy now refined by the Habibie Center. So the Habibie Center is going to be a very big factor in this. We've seen that coming out of this summit meeting just last month in Jakarta, the focus was on democratization and how the harm about AI and the benefit of AI could be all interrelated not two separate conversations, but part of a conversation that brings these two sides together so that we could optimize the benefit of AI for this large nation of Indonesia while minimizing the harm for Indonesia. And this could be a model that we could bring to the rest of the G20 as soon as next year in Brazil. So I'm so excited that my relationship with Ilham Habibie,
Wait, you have to lean forward a bit.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
I'm
Sorry.
I'm so excited in talking about this because it's making my life meaningful, Ilham. This topic, it's as if it was
Happy
in
to
the
hear that.
cards all along, and I think we can do it. The conditions are created from our 25 years together, and we've seen coming out of this recent summit that all the criteria for AI governance that the Indonesian government is now articulating can truly be fulfilled by this framework of meaningful
Okay.
AI.
Thank you, Craig, for the very positive and very enthusiastic words and very kind words about our relationship and about the future. You mentioned some very important, some very salient points regarding meaningful artificial intelligence, or MAI, or MI. And I think the aspirations are quite large. And I do like the idea of developing a framework which is relevant for the whole world, not starting in the developed world, but in the developing world, which is not going to be an easy journey because the developing world is not as united as we wish. So there are large differences of opinion also caused by the different types of political systems in the various countries. But I think the G20 process in the last years, last year, the G20 was hosted in Indonesia. This year it's India, next year it's Brazil, and the year after it's South Africa. So basically it's a series of hosts that are all coming from the developing world, and maybe that is a momentum that could be used in this regard, and would be useful to understand who are our partners in the other countries. But before we do that, I think, as you already pointed out indirectly, we need to mature our thoughts, applying the framework of MAI in Indonesia. And for that, we have a lot of experience, a lot of track record in Indonesia for other things that we work together on since many years in the framework of Meaningful Broadband Working Group, or Meaningful Broadband Kabupaten and Kota Initiative, etc., etc. And so from that network, from that experience, from that understanding of how to collaborate in Indonesia, which is a very large country by itself and also very complex, the diversity of Indonesia and the size of Indonesia is certainly a good training ground to try the same process on an even bigger scale, which is then global. So Indonesia is a mini globe by itself, with so many different ethnic groups, so many different languages, so many different local cultures, etc., so many different cases of use for AI in Indonesia. We have very developed parts like Jakarta and the surroundings, which is not small by any means. It's 30 million people live in an area which is quasi-developed already, I think. And then there are very underdeveloped parts of Indonesia, in the East, particularly. I don't want to mention one by one right now, which, I mean, the difference between the two, and we're talking about the same country, is enormous. Enormous in terms of development, which is not only economic differences, but also educational, health, etc., etc. And how to use AI to bring more meaningful benefits for all Indonesians, no matter where they live. From that, we can learn a lot how to basically apply the then developed framework of MAI to a larger scale, which is including also other nations, particularly in the developing world, because those countries face similar challenges. They have, if you talk about Brazil for a sec, Brazil, we have an extremely developed south with a triangle between Rio, Sao Paulo, and Belo Horizonte, where the industrial heartland is. That is quite developed already. And then we have the much more underdeveloped north areas in the Amazon basin or the areas at the coast. It's a very different Brazil. And talking about other countries in the developed world, it's the same thing. So that kind of a discrepancy we find between various parts of the same country, I think, and the enormous discrepancy and divide even within your own country, that's a character we find in many, if not most, developing countries. I think in today's world, even in the developed world, although in a different level, we find that even in the United States. I mean, I'm living there or having lived there, Craig, I think you know that United States is not homogeneous. There are very different in terms of character and development status. If you go, say, from West Coast to some central parts in the US or more in the South, or then compared to the East Coast or to the Midwest, I mean, it's very different. It's one country, but still with a lot of divides even within the same country, which leads to other problems that we see right now in the US, but I don't want to go too deep into that topic. What do you think, Craig? Is that something we could do together?
Sure, Ilham. Now, I want to say something about this question of diversity.
Right.
And like, I think that one would obviously raise the question of, well, wouldn't it be India that takes the lead on this approach from the developing world? Because under Prime Minister Modi, doesn't everybody now have 5G? Isn't everybody getting the infrastructure and so forth to create a coherent nationwide digital economy? Well, when we compare India and Indonesia, we see that Indonesia is able to move swiftly on a national project like this, moving from the Istana Negara in Jakarta all the way down to the 600 Kabupaten or so across the nation, because it has a coherence that India doesn't have. India has something like 30 official languages. Indonesia has Bahasa Indonesia, a lingua franca that connects the whole nation. And it's due to that and to the activity of people like Education Minister Nadim that they're able to take a kind of disruptive reform strategy to bring this kind of agency and critical thinking to everybody in the nation under a coherent framework, immediately top to bottom and bottom to up. And it turns out that the Wantikas, the National ICT Council that Ilham represents, has all the structures in place, cross-sector and bottom to top, that could be activated immediately to bring meaningful AI into national display, and in ways that India just couldn't follow. And it's because of this exactly that right now there's no time to lose in taking the initiative to remaking Meaningful Broadband Working Group into a Meaningful AI Working Group, to to bring all these amazing enterprises, ministries, World Bank, and so forth together in order to activate this possibility.
Okay, Greg, that's a very, very good points. I like to add a little bit about what you just said. I think the one thing that makes India and Indonesia both very suitable candidates to look at how to implement the framework of meaningful AI is because both of them are open democracies. There are democracies and they are at the same time developing nations. However, the way democracy is being actually at the state of the democracy in both countries is different. I don't want to go in detail how things are at the moment in India, but I think it is clear that, as you said, India is also a very diverse country, but at the same time, it is much larger than Indonesia. It is 5 times the size of Indonesia. It is right now the largest country in the world. Is larger than China. So that if you would start there, although they do have sometimes the ability to implement things very quickly, just remember how they got the digital unique identity of all Indians within just 2 years. Every Indian had a unique digital identity, amazing achievement. And they, on top of that, they built now what they use, what they describe as the digital public infrastructure. And I think in that regard, I have to admit fairly that India is ahead of Indonesia. They also have an amazing developed IT industry where millions and millions of Indians are employed. And it happens quite often in Indonesia that if you cannot find enough people in Indonesia that in the IT sector or any other startup sector right now, which needs a lot of IT, then those solutions are often bringing in Indians from India to work here or directly outsourced to India. So there's many things where India is definitely ahead of us in Indonesia. But one thing, or there's a few things where it makes it, I think, more complicated to do MAI in India as a pilot project because of the size. I think it's one thing, and also the current state of the politics in India. I mean, we know that in Indonesia, and I don't want to go too much in detail here, but I think Indonesia, diversity is actually celebrated, and it is by and large something accepted without disadvantaging certain groups in Indonesia. Yes, of course, it's not perfect, and there are many things to be improved. However, at the national leadership level, it is clear that any form of intolerance of discrimination is not allowed. This is against Indonesian nationalism. And I think at the moment in India, things are different. And I don't want to go too much in detail there, but from my observation, the question of acceptance of diversity is differently approached at the moment in India, and therefore the collaboration between parties might not be as easy as in Indonesia. I mean, there has been a very good article recently in the in Economist, maybe 2 months back, where both democracies were compared, and I think what I said was by and large described there. Also, the big question regarding how to handle diversity was also discussed there. So for everybody who wants to have more readings on that, just look at a few editions of the Economist back, maybe like 2 months. The topic of comparing Indonesia and India was basically a headline and discussed what's actually the difference between the two nations. Okay, I give it back to Craig.
Okay, so yeah, there's this sort of big geopolitical question. I just want to say quickly that the 5 nations of the G20, the 5 developing nations of the G20, are similar in a certain way, that they're agnostic about the U.S. and Russian conflict in the Ukraine. So they're not biased on those issues. They're pragmatic.
You're not including China here, right? China, is it
Yeah, and they're really also agnostic between U.S. and China's interest, and in that sense, they probably would avoid the decoupling of the U.S.-China digital economies tied to semiconductors and things like that. So we can imagine that MAI would help to avoid this decoupling between US and China and bring both of them together on behalf of that strata of the lower middle class in the global economy that could be upgraded into a new middle class.
Okay, good point, Craig. I think that's another point I'd like to emphasize here before I forget. Indonesia is also, I think, a good candidate because we're strictly neutral. We are having a very good relationship with China, politically, economically, culturally, and the same goes for the United States. And we don't side with any particular camp, and Indonesia being a co-founder of the so-called non-alignment movement that was founded in 1955 in Bandung, Indonesia. We are, I think, very well suited to do that as a pilot project for MAI. If you compare with India for a sec, yes, they can be agnostic, but they have a different relationship with China. And I think there you have the question of strategic competition between both countries, which are both very big, and they have borders with one another, and even some disagreement regarding those borders. And with some incidents, if I may say that happened just recently. And so it's a very different situation than us in Indonesia, although we have those potential disputes in the South China Sea. However, it is not playing a major role in the day-to-day politics in Indonesia. And so we can remain strictly neutral and basically work with both digital ecosystems, be it in China or be it in the United States.
And I want to emphasize, Ilham, that the UN's United Nations system is rather weak right now. The structures within the UN, such as International Telecommunications Union, such as the World Trade Organization, and a dozen other agencies, are unlikely to have the force to bring US and China sides together and essentially remake the global system so that it really is able to optimize the benefit of AI and minimize the harm. So what makes the G20 so relevant is, despite the fact that even India does not have an AI gathering this year in its hosting of G20, is that I just forgot the point that I was going to make, but yeah, I basically think that that the G20, unlike, say, the OECD, the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is very much driven by European interests and so forth, that what we've seen in coming out of Europe, the AI Act of EU, for example, and all the other international coalitions around AI, they're not balanced between US and China. So what we're going to be able to do with G20 is to leverage the powerful hosting role of these five governments that have pledged themselves to an alignment from year to year between the digital economy working groups of each of these five countries, so that they invite China, which is a member of G20. They invite EU, which is a multinational member of G20, and the US, all to join with the developing world. So if this could be achieved, it would establish a balance and would be, without this activity, the concentration of wealth in the top 1% will merely rise to the point of totally breaking any kind of social contract and creating basically chaos in the global economy. You already have the top 10 richest people in the world equal to 30% of the total wealth of the entire world. And we're going to see even more concentrated wealth if this coalition of developing nations doesn't emerge. So this is the geopolitical issue. But I want to mention just quickly, Ilham, what are possible next steps for Indonesia to activate this potential?
Maybe, Craig, before you do that, you should talk about the 3 parts of the model. And I see this here. There's something regarding the individual adopters, the early adopters, and then we have an enterprise part, and the last one is regarding security.
Right. And so when it comes to individuals, what we've seen with the activation of Chat GPT is that in the first month, 100 million users downloaded the OpenAI, the fastest download of any software in history, faster even than Gmail. So most of these people were young Gen Z and Gen X people that shared with each other. There was no what?
I'm one of the downloaders.
Okay. Well, there's a few old guys like Ilham who did it also.
Like you.
Well, I'm 77 and I downloaded it in the first week.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the Chat GPT had a head start. So right now we have Gemini coming out of Alphabet, Google, and we have new versions similar to Chat GPT coming out of China that are soon to be announced. And then we have the changes within Facebook, Instagram, leading to Threads and so forth, competing with Musk, and X used to be Twitter. So you have a kind of rebalancing of forces in Silicon Valley. But so basically, getting back to Indonesia, what I'm proposing is that we have some classes where we test out different versions of chatbots from Microsoft, from OpenAI, from Google, from China, from Israel,
You have
or
to lean
whatever.
forward, Craig. We don't hear you.
Oh, what I'm suggesting is that we have a 9-week course where we have a framework for how the early adopters of various types of chatbots could be studied and researched and measured to find out which is the best for Indonesia. And so that has to do with sort of researching and testing. This could be seen as part of the informal education tied to Minister Nadim's Minister of Education. And so we need to open a discussion with Nadim about that. Now, the second strand of this is enterprises. So we already have an amazing collection of ministries and organizations that are taking the lead in Indonesia's digital economy. And these, so we could flash on the screen the names of these entities of these enterprises. And the idea is to welcome the executives of these 20 different enterprises, that they could work together to consider policies and practices, the innovations in all these different organizations that could be achieved to produce a synergy surrounding the young people who are adopting the chatbots. And on the third level, we're talking about security. So the various elements of security, such as guarding the territorial waters around Indonesia and other issues specific to Indonesia security, could be all incorporated into a single ecosystem of individuals, enterprises, and finally security. So
It's hard to hear you, Craig. It's hard to hear you.
We could see the interface between individuals, enterprises, and security, so that they're all part of the same ecosystem.
Okay, if you say security, do you mean government? The security that comes from government, like the armed forces, police, or the intelligence?
Right. The defense agencies, the military,
Okay.
And all of them could be under a framework united by Cominfo under its new AI-oriented framework that seems completely consistent with meaningful AI.
Yeah. And we do have a new minister who I've met a few times already, and also a new vice minister, and I'm looking forward to collaborate with them. Well, we will have some follow-up meetings with them, I believe, in order to see how we can collaborate with Cominfo. Yeah. I got a few more questions. I mean, what do you think about how can Indonesian government in general benefit from that, not only security-wise, but also maybe other aspects like economy, education, health, or the government services themselves? And the second question is, how do we basically bring the international factor here in? Meaning corporations or other governments, or even people from all over the world. How does it work? I mean, you mentioned the 5 nations within the G20 that could be collaborating in this regard, but how do you see that working out in general?
Yeah, well,
the government first and then the international factor.
Right. So, interestingly enough,
it's very difficult to hear you. There's some, I think the quality of your broadband is difficult.
Yeah, I have Starlink going on up above me, so we'll have to send a message to Elon Musk to get his access.
Are you connected to Starlink?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe is it cloudy at the moment?
Maybe.
Maybe a lot of clouds.
No, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, I am, but it's just very how can I say, very inconsistent. Sometimes it's very good, sometimes it's very difficult to hear you.
Well, I've been leaning away from the screen, so let me lean into the screen.
Theirs is all very clear now, very ultra clear.
Okay, so it's very, very important that there was a little known innovation that occurred last year when Indonesia joined with India, joined with Brazil, joined with South Africa. They created a kind of digital economy working group of the G20, and they pledged to have consistency as they move from nation to nation, so that the innovations of one G20 would not be lost when a new government took over the hosting of G20. So this is the critical structure within G20 that we need to work with.
Okay, so through DEWG, Digital Economy Working
Group of the G20. And so this would be linked to the foreign ministries and so forth to basically further the interaction between them. Now, there's one other thing that I want to mention, Ilham.
Sure, go ahead.
the role of philanthropy in all this. And we do know that Sam Altman is an adherent of effective altruism, which is a form of philanthropy. But I believe that there is a role for the big international foundations in all of this. It's important to know that these big foundations, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the biggest foundations in the world, international foundations, they formed an alliance in 1999 to activate the global movement to close digital divide. And so I think what we should do is the Habibie Center and its counterparts in other countries and the Digital Divide Insttute and so forth should go back to these international foundations to give them a role in establishing a vital role in promoting democratization in this new AI-driven era. So I think there's an amazing role for philanthropy in all of this.
Okay, that's a good point. In fact, as a chairman of the board of trustees of the Habibie Center, I can inform you here that we do have a very dynamic and very intense relationship with the Ford Foundation, and now also starting with some others in the US and in other countries. We are now more focused on climate-related issues like energy transition. In the context of G20, G7, we have to say Just Energy Transition Partnership, JETP. That's a major topic that's being explored. But my feel is that this collaboration might very well extend into other very relevant areas like democratizations or the proper use of AI, etc. Also in the proper use of AI in the context of democratization, which might lead to a better implementation of JETP. I mean, why not? I mean, this is all very important topics, and they certainly have some interrelationships between them.
Yeah, and so one dimension of this that we haven't explored is an emerging viewpoint, Ilham, that suggests that humanity's greatest opportunity to ending global warming and even reversing global warming possibly is through AI. It's through the way that data can become integrated into the strategies for reducing climate change, and to understand that this is the vital new factor that holds promise for addressing the world's existential crises. But in order for this function to take place, there needs to be a balanced response to the global problem of artificial intelligence. And out of that balanced response, we could find solutions to global warming. We can find solutions to nuclear existential risks and so forth. So it's so important. It's probably the most important factor right now in reducing the existential risks in the world, produce this balanced and meaningful approach to AI that could begin in Indonesia.
Okay, so you're basically painting a picture where AI becomes so fundamental to the degree that it is interconnected and very relevant for the major problems and challenges that we face in all countries in the world, which are related to climate, but not limited to climate. It could be, as we discussed before, improve government actually in terms of delivering what the promises of the governments are in a open and transparent way, and at the same time also the use of AI itself. So to bring development to all parts of society in a meaningful way. Okay, yeah, I think very important parts, very important points that we just discussed. Anything else to say? I know it's getting late in Mexico. I don't want to keep you away too long. I don't know what time it is. I suspect it's midnight or something like that in near Mexico City where you are right now. Any final closing words you want to say?
I just want to say, in this lifetime that's so short between birth and death, there's only so many close relationships that you can have. And my relationship with Ilham Habibie doesn't make any sense at all. I'm an American. I'm gay. I'm living in Mexico. I don't have, I'm not Muslim. I'm Buddhist, and it doesn't make any sense at all to
Doesn't
be.
have to make sense.
No, but what makes sense is a matter of values.
Exactly.
It's a matter of seeing how we have been able to empower each other from different perspectives in order to bring us to this moment where perhaps there was a window opening up about how to bring the negativities about AI together with positive aspects of AI in a balanced economy. All this is very complicated. It couldn't just happen by itself. It has to grow out of human relationships. And so I'm so devoted to my friendship with Ilham Habibie.
You have to lean forward, Craig. We can't hear you.
I'm so devoted
Okay,
and
sorry.
appreciative of my friendship with Ilham Habibie, and I just
Thank you,
want
Craig.
to
You're my friend too.
sign off with that viewpoint that this is something that can be an offering to the world and to Indonesia and to each of us as we form a community around this notion of
I can't hear you. You're gone. You're gone, Craig. Something's happened. There's no noise at all.
There's no noise.
No, now it's okay. Now it's okay. Sandy, but there's not now. Hello?
Okay, I just want to say that.
We can't hear you, Craig. Maybe their laptop is getting tired.
No, I think that relationships matter.
Yeah.
And sometimes relationships don't really make sense until the end of your life when you realize what can be brought together. These relationships can actually have function of empowerment in the world. And from this point of view, I just want to express gratitude for the and the and Wantikas for hosting this meeting and for bringing our relationship, my relationship with Ilham, to some kind of fruition at possibly the end of my lifetime.
Thank you very much, Craig, for your very, very kind words. And I do cherish our relationship, our friendship, our partnership that we have since so many years. And I totally agree with you. We'll keep on collaborating no matter where we are. You are in Mexico, I'm in Indonesia right now. Things can change. Maybe you're going to be somewhere else in some time to come, and me too. But whatever we have started so many years ago, even at some point in time, we're not there anymore. And I refer to both of us. I hope that the future generation will take the baton, as you always say, and basically continue the journey, the struggle, and the fight, or more positively, the work that we have started to basically bring betterment for all humans in this world, wherever they, no matter who they are, to use technologies such as broadband AI. There might be future things to come in a more meaningful way. Thank you, Craig. And I say good night to you from Jakarta, and I hope to see you soon. This is the first of, I think, many podcasts to come. This is something we definitely will continue in order to discuss things in detail, and your very good suggestions that we just gathered here in this podcast will definitely follow up on that and come back to you and maybe discuss more things in detail, how to continue this further on. Thank you, Craig, and good night, and talk to you soon. Buenas noches. Buenas noches a ti en México.
Es un país maravilloso y estoy tan satisfecho por estar aquí.
Espero que puedo la oportunidad verte en México.
Okay, and I want to thank Pak Jerry Fermanza.
Yeah, Jerry, thank you. And everybody
I don't know if he's still around, but
he's here. I'm looking at him. I'm looking at him. He's here.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Gary.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Bye, Craig. Thank you. Good night.